Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're going to be taking a look at an NES game called Destiny of an Emperor. In fact, this game was actually a request to me. It was requested to me by BioPhoenix, and he's a really good YouTuber, so go check him out if you haven't. So thank you for the request. So Destiny of an Emperor is an RPG that was developed and published by Capcom. So yes, Capcom has made an RPG before they started working on the Breath of Fire series, and it was released in 1990 in North America and 89 in Japan. In fact, the Japanese version of this game is actually based after a manga, and it's called Tenchi Wu Kararu. I might have screwed up saying the last part, but oh well, who cares. But basically, the story of that manga is like the Romance of Three Kingdoms, but more fantasy-like. So yes, technically, this is another game that is based after Romance of the Three Kingdoms. But the story in this one follows Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Zhang Fei. So yes, you're using the more iconic characters from the Kingdom of Shu. So I'm willing to bet that most of the people that are watching this are probably familiar with these characters just because they played a game called Dynasty Warriors. Which is cool and all because I always like the story within those games are based after. So there's not a whole lot of things I can say about the story since it is loosely based after the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. But it is something you don't see too often within RPGs, is having a story that's directly based after a historical event. Now yes, there are some RPGs out there that have like characters or settings, but not really like an entire like story. So now, let's get moving on to the gameplay, and it's a turn-based RPG very similar to Dragon Quest. Actually, it's a lot like it in a lot of ways. Although weirdly enough, a lot of sites categorize this game as a strategy RPG, and I don't fully agree with that, but I can kinda get what they're trying to say. And that is that the fact that you can use like a shitload of party members, and there's also the fact that you just really gotta strategize your movements and shit. But other than those two things, I don't really consider it to be a strategy RPG. Now, it's not like one of those simulated ones like Nobunaga's Ambition, or it's not like one of the grid-based ones like Fire Emblem. But as I said, it's more turn-based. So you start off with 3 units, and that is the 3 characters I already mentioned, you know, like Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Zhang Fei. And you gotta travel to different towns, and at the same time, you gotta defend yourself from the Yellow Turbans. So just like Dragon Quest, you talk to people in the same way. You can buy items, buy equipment, and once you leave the town, you get to go to an overworld and get to fight enemies. So that's all some pretty typical stuff, but as for the battle system, this is where things get pretty different. So yes, it is a turn-based battle system, which is pretty easy stuff to understand. But the difference is that your health. Now, this isn't like your health bar for like the officer yourself. This actually has to do with the number of troops that you have. And while the battle system is fairly easy to understand once you wrap your head around the fact that it's actually the number of troops, my only issue with it is that it really takes fucking forever to actually get some shit done. So I think your best bet is just to use the auto attack, or in this case it's labeled all out, because it just goes by a lot quicker. But you don't want to use it too much since you do gotta regain the number of troops you have by using rations every once in a while. But the one thing that is really cool about this battle system though is that you can actually recruit some of the enemies to join your side. And once an enemy does join your side, you'll never be able to encounter that same enemy ever again. Unless you kick them out of the party, then you'll be able to run into them. So it's actually pretty cool how that works. In fact, if you want to know how many enemies there are in this game that you can catch up to, there's about 150. So pretty much the same amount that you can capture within Pokemon. So if I say so myself, that's actually a pretty unique feature. And there's not too many boss characters within the game. Like yes, there's the leader of the Yellow Turbans named Zhang Zhao, and then there's Cao Pi and Sima Yi, which are the final boss. And yes, it's Cao Pi, not Cow Pi, or what I like to call him as Cow Piss, but yeah, you get the idea. So while it is kind of unfortunate there's not too many bosses within the game, at least there is like a huge amount of characters that are playable, even though some of them are kind of just throwaways. But it is a pretty cool and unique way to build around an RPG. Now, before I end this part, one thing I really gotta say here that is pretty important to know is that you really gotta have a strategist within this game. And what the strategist role does in this game is that he allows you to use magic attacks. But not only does he get to use the magic attacks, but pretty much everyone in your party does the same magic attacks that he has. And of course the magic in this game is used by TP, which stands for Tactical Points. Because for a very long time I was actually very confused with this game of trying to use one of these. But after looking into it, I realized that, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense that you need to have a strategist to use tactics. Well, duh. So yes, on the outside, this game may seem like a Dragon Quest clone, but is actually really not when it comes to the battles and the way how it functions. But when it comes to the overworld and all that kind of stuff, then yes, it is pretty much a lot like Dragon Quest. So now, let's get moving on to the graphics, and I know what you're thinking, what about the controls? Well, it's an RPG, all you gotta do is just move around and just press a bunch of buttons and select things. I mean, there's not much else I can say about that. But anyways, as for the graphics, I do think they are pretty good. There's a lot of bright colors, some of the backgrounds are pretty nice, and of course some of the character designs are also pretty cool looking. And like I said a whole bunch of times about Dragon Quest is that yes, the overworld of this game really does look a lot like Dragon Quest. I mean, if you just take a look at it real quick, if you walked into a room right now and I was playing this game, you'd be thinking I'd be playing a Dragon Quest game, but in reality I'm actually playing Destiny of an Emperor, or watching porn. Or if I was just such a total weeboo, then the whole scenario would change into walking in on someone watching a fucked up hentai involving lolicons. Okay, that's a little bit too fucked up, even for me, but anyways. But if there is one thing I do wish they added a little bit more to, would be the battle scenes. Now yes, it's a simple black background, which does work fine, but it would have been nicer if they actually added in like just a little bit of a border or some little tiny bits of background, kinda like what they did with Final Fantasy 1. I think it would have been nice if they did a little bit of extra detail on that, but otherwise, I do think it does look fine, and as for the graphics overall, I do think they are actually pretty nice looking. Now, as for the game's music, I think it's actually quite good. In fact, the music in this game really does sound Capcom-like, since a lot of the songs do kind of remind me of something out of Mega Man, which is actually an awesome thing. But of course, it's not nearly as memorable as the songs in those games, but it is still pretty good sounding, and of course, it is also very well done and does suit the theme. But I'd say the battle themes are probably my favorite personally. So even though this game's OST is not nearly as memorable as some of their other games, at least it is still really good, and some of them are kinda catchy, so with that said, I do think it is actually pretty good. Now, if you want to buy this game actually goes for about $20, $25, sometimes even $30, and of course the complete in-box copies cost like a lot more. And I have seen this game a couple times around, and it was actually pretty affordable, but unfortunately I just never got around to getting the game, and I kinda wish I did, but oh well. Thankfully, it is still pretty cheap for an NES game that's from Capcom after all. But interesting enough, if you got the game brand new at the time when this game was released, the game came with a Mega Man sticker, and that's pretty cool. Although I am not sure if that sticker has any worth or value or anything like that, since all the copies that I've looked up didn't really have the sticker, but it's still cool that this game did originally come with a sticker. And like I said in some of my favorite box arts for NES games, this one is also one that I really do like quite a bit since, you know, I do like samurai stuff. And thinking about it now, this game actually doesn't have any samurais involved, they just made it look like a samurai game. Fuck you, Crapcom, for making us this game that has nothing to do with samurais. Oh, you're the worst company ever. Go back to making DLC again. Okay, I think that impression kinda turned slowly into Steve Austin, which is kinda funny to think about. So anyways, as for my overall thoughts, I actually do think this is a pretty good RPG. However, while I do think this is a really good RPG, I do find it is kinda hard to recommend it to people. Because my only issues with this game is that yes, some of the battles do feel pretty slow paced, even though there is like the all out attack option which does make it go by faster, but you really don't want to use that on the boss battles. And the enemy encounter rate is pretty damn high. They should have toned it down a couple notches, but thankfully there is an item in this game that does lower it down quite a lot, and that item is called a smoke pot. And yes, you heard me, a pot made out of smoke. What, you thought I was talking about weed? Like, get the fuck out of here. Nah, I'm just kidding. I thought the exact same thing when I first played this game. But it is amusing to know that they didn't try to change it because they thought that people would misunderstand it for drug use. Well, whatever, it doesn't really matter, it's just kinda funny to think about. But now, just to get back on track, the only other thing I will have to say with this game is that, yes, because this is an NES game that is an RPG, there is expected to be a whole lot of grinding. And that's another thing that can turn off some people about this game. But that was a pretty common thing back in the day. But other than these things, I do think this is a pretty good and unique RPG. And while the story does work for what it is, since it is based after a historical event, and very loosely at that, it does work fine the way it is. But I did have some pretty good times with this game. But as I said, there are some things about this game that may turn off other people, such as like the amount of grinding you have to do, the fact that the battle system is a little bit slow paced, and the enemy encounter rate. But if you really do enjoy the hardcoreness of NES RPGs, then yes, I can definitely recommend this one. And if you like anything involving the Three Kingdom era, then yes, I can also recommend this one. And as you know me, or in case you didn't know this about me, but I'm actually a huge fan of the Dynasty Warrior games, and of course I am also a fan of the historical stuff behind it. Since that is one of the main interests of why I wanted to play this game, since it is an RPG based after that stuff. And it just ever so happened to be made by Capcom back when they were actually really fucking good. Now, before I end this one, they actually do have a couple more games within this series, if you could believe it. And they actually made a sequel, but only in Japan on the Famicom in the year 1991. So I guess releasing that one over here probably wouldn't do so well, since that was the same year that the Super Nintendo came out. And then in the year 1994, there was one on the Game Boy, but it was actually not developed by Capcom. Apparently it was developed by a company named Sun L. In fact, this game actually has the same name as the first game in Japan, but is actually an entirely new game. And in 1988, before Capcom made their game, there was actually another game that was based after this manga series, and it also has the same name, but it's an entirely different game, and it was on the PC-88. And then in 2007, on the PC, they actually made an editor program where you get to make your own Destiny game, and that's called Destiny of an Editor. Wow, that's kinda clever. Now, one more last game I'm going to list here that is related to this series, and it is also from Capcom, and that happens to be a game called Dynasty Wars. Yeah, not to be confused with Dynasty Warriors, which came out much later. And funny enough, this game actually plays like a beat-em-up, much like Final Fight, but just has the same setting with the whole Three Kingdom era. So that's pretty fucking awesome, but unfortunately, it never really got an accessible home port. Like, the closest thing we have is the PC Engine Super CD-ROM, which is only in Japan. But it is also released on a few computer systems, and of course the arcade. And thank God we have MAME for that, because this game fucking rules. And there is another one called Warriors of Fate, but it's pretty much the same basic stuff. So anyways, with all that aside, Destiny of an Emperor is a pretty cool game that I do enjoy quite a bit myself, but as I already said, it's not going to be for everyone. But if this game does seem interesting to you, then I can recommend it. With that being said, that'll be the end of this review, so thank you for watching and commenting, and hope you guys have a great day.